Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special segment today on the 30th day of May 2023. Well, May will soon be behind us. Well, right now in Brisbane, it's smoky. What's this smoke all about? If you've got any clue, or if you'd like to discuss that, you can call us or send us a message via the comment section, and we'll be able to chat to you. But do you know what all this smoke is about for the last couple of days? And it's even in the air. You can even smell it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, let's get on with the news. And today, we have a very special segment coming at 11 a.m. Just a pre-warning that segment will be in Hindi. It's on the inauguration of the new Sansad Bhavan in India, a very historic moment, a very historic building, and built with the Indian values going from down south to up north. So many different regions, so many different religions, so many different chains of thoughts, and so much culture behind everything, and how that all has been incorporated. That segment will be streamed at 11 a.m. and that is in Hindi, just a pre-warning on that historic moment of the inauguration of this new Sansad Bhavan, or the Parliament House. Well, right now, today, 11 degrees, as I mentioned today, still very smoky outside, and you can just smell that in the air as well. Well, first of all, let's look at the news in brief. And of course, we know that Mark McGowan has tendered in his resignation. We will take a close look at that as to what happened. Is he just plain exhaustion? What is it? We thought he was doing quite well. So in this news segment, always there will be commentary from our side. And remember that the commentary that we make is our personal views as well. So right now, let's take a look at the news in brief.
Western Australians will have a new premier within days after Mark McGowan's shock resignation. The popular leader blindsided allies and opponents with his announcement yesterday. He says he's exhausted by the role and needs to step away. Current and former political leaders across the country are paying tribute to his work in the top job. Accounting and consultancy firm PwC remains under close scrutiny this morning, despite putting 9 of its partners on leave as it investigates the tax leaks scandal. The firm has pushed back against mounting pressure to name those involved in the leaks, which involve confidential government data being passed on to PwC clients. But the Greens are still pushing for a full independent investigation.
So we need to know much more about the wider group of people who've been engaged in this terrible chapter, which has used confidential information to profit from, and we need to know what people did exactly.
Demolition works will begin today on the historic inner Sydney building that was engulfed by a fire last week. Police will also search the wreckage for any bodies using cadaver detection dogs and forensic imaging. They say 15 rough sleepers were using the building for shelter the night before the fire, and 2 of them still haven't been located. Meanwhile, contractors and engineers will assess if any parts of the 110-year-old building can be salvaged.
And what a great tragedy there. 110 years old building just gone up in flames. Well, right now, the lead news for today is the resignation of Western Australia Premier Mark McGowan. Let's go to that report.
A booming state economy and opinion polls other leaders could only dream of. From the outside, Mark McGowan had it all.
But the truth is, I'm tired. Extremely tired. In fact, I'm exhausted.
Behind the scenes, managing the pandemic was taking a brutal toll.
Today I'm announcing that I'll be stepping down as Premier and as member for Rockingham.
Mark McGowan became Premier in 2017.
I came here 27 years ago in my Corolla across the Nullarbor, and today the people of Western Australia have made me Premier. Thank you.
But it wasn't until the pandemic hit he became a household name and cult-like figure to some.
Do you want to pick me up?
His decision to enforce the nation's strictest border controls brought him immense popularity.
And I'm in love, I'd do anything for you in your heart, heart, heart. Border.
That booming support saw him re-elected in 2021, obliterating the opposition and leaving the Liberals as a shell of a party with just 2 seats in the lower house. For the first time, Labor controlled both houses of Parliament, giving the Premier unprecedented power. The landslide victory gave him the confidence to take on other states over WA's hard border and share of the GST.
I want to pay tribute to Mark McGowan, my friend, a confidant, but also an extraordinarily successful Premier of Western Australia.
Mark McGowan's constituents in Rockingham have been left stunned.
Sad day for us, mate. Yeah, we like him.
I think he's done a really good job. I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to fill his shoes now.
With Mark McGowan hoping to be out of the job by Friday, a frantic race is now underway to find an alternative Premier in the state. Jake Sturmer, ABC News.
And finding an alternative Premier would be hard. Well, of course, there will be people who will put up their hands. But looking at his popularity and the amazing work that he did, well, of course, always it is very hard to find what's actually happening behind the scenes, what kind of toll it's taking mentally on an individual. But of course, it's always a good thing to exit on a high note, where you are on the high rather than, living in other circumstances. So the circumstances under which he is living the top job, while he is high, very popular, and everyone's sending in the words of praises. So I think he did very well for Western Australia. If you just look at the figures and retaining the budget surplus after surplus, so that was a great achievement on his behalf. Well, right now let's take a look at a different angle on the same report.
Perhaps it's not surprising when we consider the immense pressure that the Premier would have been under for the past 6 years. And, he talked about constant conflict and difficulties every day. And I think we also consider the toll that it's perhaps taken on his family, his wife and his children too. So a shock, but maybe not a surprise.
He is in a very unique position. There are a few people in the country who have as much exposure as him, who have as much daily conflict as him, as he referred to yesterday. But just more broadly within the community, are you seeing this kind of exhaustion from people citing COVID?
Yeah, I think generally we are. And if you think about what the community has dealt with over the last few years, with going through a pandemic, there's been a lot of natural disasters, and people are reporting more stress and more anxiety. And we know that when there is prolonged periods of stress, that does lead to burnout and just exhaustion.
When he talked about quitting, he did talk about, he said he's not normally a confrontational person, but every day he has to have arguments and confrontation. Just speaking generally, does that wear people down?
Absolutely, and that's going to take its toll. And what happens when we have those prolonged periods of stress and anxiety, it leads to complete overwhelm, and that's physical, emotional and mental overwhelm. And over time, the person then burns out. They become completely detached from what they're doing. They lose motivation. They become very tired, and it impacts not just their work, but all areas of their life. And it's something that really we need to take quite seriously, and we need to look at this from a prevention lens and actually be looking at dealing with our stress before it leads to the burnout and the exhaustion.
Well, give us some tips then for people about how to avoid that, and also some signs that they might be reaching that point.
Yeah, so just have a look at how you're feeling every day and what sort of keeps repeating, what keeps coming up for you that's different to maybe how you were a year ago. And just have a look at your general lifestyle. And it might sound simple, but things like good sleep, eating well and exercising are all really important, but so is talking to family and friends, and also making sure that we take time for enjoyable activities, making sure it's not just all about work and that there is a buffer between work and home. And if that becomes too much, then I think it's time to reach out to your GP or to your psychologist. And although burnout is not a mental illness. Burnout can lead to feelings of depression and anxiety if it's left untreated.
Yeah, and can you fix burnout? I mean, you know, taking a holiday, does that help? Maybe doing a different job, can that help too?
Absolutely. You can fix burnout and you can work on burnout. It isn't as simple as just taking a holiday, I'm afraid. I wish that it was, but if we take a holiday and then go back into the same anxiety and the same stress, then we're going to find ourselves in the same position. So it might be actually about making significant changes to our life.
And can I just ask you about the example that Mark McGowan and also Peter Gutwein before him, Michael Gunner, Jacinda Ardern, all of those leaders are setting and actually acknowledging that they feel exhausted and tired. Do you think it's good to see that kind of honesty from our leaders?
I do. You know, exhaustion, mental health issues affect everyone, and actually what those leaders have done is they've called it. When they felt it at the time, when they've decided I've given everything, I've given my best, and perhaps I'm not the best person for this job anymore, they've called that, and I think there's a great strength in that. And there's also a great strength in talking about mental health and just talking about feeling tired, feeling exhausted.
Okay. I suppose the tricky thing is, particularly for people in that job, they're not really able to do it. You know, they can't step away, they can't do those things. Maybe we need to reevaluate the things that we expect of our leaders.
Absolutely, and I think that that's across the board too. We need to look at all workplaces, and actually workplaces have a responsibility to say, are we supporting our employees enough? That kind of workplace culture starts at the top, and so we really need commitment from employers to be looking after the employees, to be looking after mental health.
And that leads us to the other question, what about the mental health of the employers? People at the top, the managers, as we have seen that the Premier being in the top job always has more pressure than actually someone underneath who could just say, right, I'm not feeling well, taking a leave today. But the commitment and the commitments that are at the people at the top level sometimes makes it hard, even when they are sick, to take a day off. And because of the commitments that they are, community engagement and other things, they just cannot take a day off or leave or chill out. Now, as they reckon, it's not as easy as, all right, I'll hand in a medical certificate, or sorry, I can't make it to work today. In that scenario, because there are people within the community, you know, especially many small business owners as well, who find it very hard, you know, to take because of the responsibility and the commitments that they have. Number two is affordability as well. They cannot afford in order to lose another day of their business. The prices are so immense with the diminishing profit margins these days. So it is very hard, especially in SMEs. I'm not talking about large corporates. They are a complete different scenario there. They can afford all those kind of things. Well, there are a lot of resources ahead. When I mean resources, I mean human resources, financial resources as well. So there is someone else to take on that. So many times, if you are away and you are it, then it makes it very hard. So what about the mental health and the mental conditions of people in those situations? Food for thought. Well, right now, let's go to this next news, which is on anti-protest laws. So what's happening with the protest? But this one is particularly for South Australia. And should there be a uniform law throughout the country when it comes to protests?
Less than 2 weeks ago, the Leader of the Opposition announced that he had a private member's bill to crack down on protesters with $50,000 fines and up to 3 months in jail. And the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, came out and said the government was going to match it. And by lunchtime, after just 20 minutes of debate, you'd seen the bill pass through the House of Assembly. And as a Member of Parliament in the Upper House, I hadn't even seen it. It hadn't even been published on the Parliament's website, so members of the community hadn't seen it either. Labor. It's been an absolutely terrible process. The two major parties are in lockstep on this, and the Greens are doing everything we can to try and knock off the bill and also to ensure it gets the scrutiny that it requires in the Parliament today.
Well, look, this was in response to an Extinction Rebellion protest that took place a couple of weeks ago. That's what fired this up. Someone was charged after abseiling down from a bridge. There was traffic chaos in Adelaide. Did that protest take it too far? Do you have to be that disruptive to make your point made? And it was because there was an oil and gas conference going on.
Well, the thing to remember here is that some of the people that were involved with that protest have actually already been charged with other offences. So I'm not quite sure what the problem is that the government is trying to solve here.
Well, they're trying to change the amount, aren't they? Because the 69-year-old who was arrested for obstructing a public place, she could end up with a $750 fine. The government and the opposition want to make that more.
But one of the people that was involved was actually charged with another offence that has a higher potential penalty. So whilst the penalty for obstructing the public space may have been low, there are other penalties available under the Criminal Code for other potential issues. So really, this is a bizarre debate that we're having here in South Australia. It's populism, it's reactionary, and the concern here is that not only does this particularly have a chilling effect on protest in our state, and the right to protest is fundamental to democracy, and in South Australia protest has played a really important role in terms of driving social change. But there's also legal advice that this could have a much broader implication because it's actually applying a significant penalty for obstructing public space, willfully or recklessly, directly or indirectly. There's concerns that that could also impact on people who are homeless, people sleeping rough, people who are simply handing out flyers. So there's a whole range of consequences that could flow here, and the government just haven't thought this through.
What can you do at this point? Try and get an amendment through?
Well, what I'm trying to do is refer it to Parliament's Legislative Review Committee. That's the logical place to send a bill like this so that all of the implications can be considered. But we're also moving a raft of amendments to try and add in some safeguards into the bill. But the problem is, Lisa, it is so terribly flawed that even if our amendments get up, the Greens wouldn't be in a position to support it. But it's not just the Greens that are speaking out against this. There's an ad in today's newspaper which has support from SA unions, Amnesty International, the Human Rights Law Centre, Human Rights Watch, Conservation Council. A range of organisations are all calling for the government to dump these laws because they're really just setting our state on a dangerous path.
So there you are. We talk about freedom of speech, freedom of association, and of course peaceful protests that are pre-approved, that go through the proper processes. People are allowed to raise their concerns, raise their voice if they do it in a civil manner, not disrupting public transport and not endangering other people's lives as well. But sometimes people go to extremes to get their point across, to get their views heard, and to bring it out into the media. Our lead out story today is the PwC. The partners have been told to take leave over the tax scandal.
Oh, it is absolutely serious. And in a sense, they tried to play it down for a long time. But if you look at what's happened over the last several weeks, their CEO stood down as CEO and announced his retirement. That is a significant thing. They've had a big investigation going on. They've brought in people from overseas to help deal with it. They're in full-blown, risk management mode. It's a big issue.
And so what do you make of the PwC response so far? The chair is gone, the chief executive's gone, this independent review has been announced, 9 partners now on leave, and 2 independent non-executive directors are going to be appointed to a governance board. What do you make of how PwC is handling this so far?
Well, I think if you look at the different reactions, particularly over the last several weeks till when it was revealed that the CEO knew about what was going on, the response has gradually become greater and greater, but they're responding to the increased public, media and political pressure. So it's not so much that they're doing all of this purely of their own accord. They're responding to growing pressure. So what's been growing is the size of the scandal has been growing, and their response has grown in line with it. But I would have thought, it appears they've kept it to as little as possible. It's just that's been quite a lot.
Yeah, but how much further has this got to go?
Well, I think it's got to go a lot more further, because I think it's not just a crisis for PwC, it's a crisis for the consulting industry more generally, especially in terms of the relationship between government and increased government reliance on consulting firms effectively outsourcing the public service. The real issue underlying this, it's more of a crisis of democracy in terms of how is government going to be run if it's constantly looking at bodies like PwC beholden to private interests responsible for providing advice of things of the public interest. And it's that deep-seated conflict of interest that I think is at the nub of the issue here.
And how has that emerged over the past couple of decades? How has that evolved?
Well, it's evolved mainly in the last decade or so of Australian government, increasingly using private consultants to seek advice on a whole variety of things. So effectively work that would have previously done by public servants, sworn to a public ethos, has now been done by independent consultants working for private firms. So there's an increasing reliance. Over the last 10 years, I think it's probably grown about threefold, the use of consultants by government. So it is getting much more prevalent. Plus, of course, there's the whole revolving door as people in politics and government work for consulting firms and audit firms, and it's a very cosy relationship that's not really aligned with the spirit of democratic governance.
So do you think it should tilt back the other way?
I think it should absolutely tilt back the other way, and I think there's really a need to restore the integrity, the pride and the ethos of public service, and ensure that advice and that work is done independent of private interests. And I think this crisis shows that using consultants cannot guarantee that.
And has this come with an ideology that you naturally have to cut down on the money going towards a public service?
In a sense, yes. Though I'm not exactly sure that the amount of money to the public service has gone down. It's just the amount that's gone to the consultants has gone up. But it does tie in with the view that private companies are somehow more efficient and better at things than public servants. And I would say that is a myth that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And it's time to rethink that some of the fundamental cultural attributes of how we think we should govern the country politically.
And so this is a very big subject. What would be the best way to approach this?
I think...
Do we need a royal commission or some kind of review, or...?
Well, I think the first thing, I think we need an assertion of the political will to do something about it. I mean, whether a royal commission, potentially, but just a commitment to rebuilding the public service and the value of the public service and moving away from consultants. I think the issues are there. I mean, a royal commission would surface more views, but unless we have the political will to do something about it and to break the close relationship between government and private sector in areas where there are fundamental conflicts of interest at a micro and at a kind of macro level, that's really where we need to start. And we're seeing signs of that, as shown by the clip you showed at the beginning of this segment.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date. So there needs to be a political will in that situation to tackle that. And unless there is a political will, then moving forward it would make it very, very hard. And it is not just the PwC, it's also other related industry experts or companies in that field, in the financial field, who could be, have implications coming out of that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our functions and events. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment. Don't forget that we have a very special presentation at 11 a.m. that will be in Hindi. That's on the inauguration of the new Parliament House or the Sansad Bhavan by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. So that's coming up at 11. And don't forget that tonight at about 7:20 we'll be going live from Gayatri Mandir and Bundal. And what an overwhelming response we have received for that. Thanks for everyone who have made comments and commentaries and likes. It's been nothing like we've done before. The most number of views and likes and comments have come from that. It's just our humble streaming from a small group on the Tuesday Ramayan group from the Gayatri Mandir and Bundal, but it's always on Australian Indian Radio's page, so you don't have to go looking for it, just on our usual Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. We'd love to see you there then. Well, until then, it's goodbye from us.